We got a lot of interesting new cards confirmed for the upcoming set Silverdust Blaze, but more importantly, we get a reintroduction of an old archetype with a brand new mechanic for Granblue. Introducing 7 Seas. Stand up! Vanguard! Hey Cardfighters, welcome back to another Cardfight update, and today we've got a very exciting and jam-packed episode as Bushiroad revealed all the SP packs with all the cards within those SP packs. So we see and we now know of certain cards that will be in that set, and some of them are quite surprising. But not only that, Bushiroad decided to reveal the new mechanic for Granblue, which we talked about in the previous Cardfight update when they introduced what Granblue is going to do for the upcoming Robbie Labyrinth set. And with the introduction and the reveal of what this new mechanic is, they also revealed the new archetype surrounding that mechanic. And they didn't just reveal 1 or 2 cards, they revealed a whopping 6 new cards for this archetype. So there's a lot to go over here. So without further ado, let's jump right into these cards and start analyzing what this new Granblue set can do for the clan, as well as what the other cards might mean for the upcoming set Silverdust Blaze. We're going to start off with the new marker that is basically the core thing that's jamming everything together for this new Granblue archetype, so we have an understanding of what we're working with. And this new marker, or this new card for Granblue, is called Treasures. And this is basically a treasure card, and it does absolutely nothing. It basically represents a treasure card. You can put it onto your Vanguard or Rearguard circle, and it just stays on that circle. But the card itself does actually nothing. It is just a pseudo card that then is on the circle, but because that card is on that circle, other skills from other cards will then activate accordingly. And that's where we're going to dive into right now, so we have an understanding of what this thing can actually do. And we're going to start off with the new grade 0 for 7C, which is 7 Seas Apprentice Night Runner. And its first ability is something that will be shared among all the 7 Seas cards, so I'm gonna address it now, and then you can take that information to every single other 7 Seas card. As its first ability is auto on Vanguard and Rearguard circle. When its attack hits, choose one of your Vanguard circle or Rearguard circle without any treasure markers and put a treasure marker. So basically every 7 Seas unit has an unhit ability where you can create an extra additional treasure for free on a circle that doesn't contain one. So you only need 6 treasures, as after the 6th one your entire board has all treasures and it won't activate anymore because all circles have a treasure, of course. But the important thing here is that it just states that the attack needs to hit, meaning you can hit the Vanguard as well as the Rearguard. So this is an important note here, as if you're being rushed, you can use your Rearguards to slam in their Rearguards to create more treasures, or at least force more guard potential from your opponent's hand if they want to deny you gaining extra treasures. So that's a very important asset here, and we're going to cover that in a bit here once we start looking at all the other cards. And Night Runner's unique ability is act on Rearguard circle, cast bind this unit, and put 2 cards from the top of your deck into the drop zone, and return a card with 7 Seas in its card name not named 7 Seas Apprentice Night Runner from your drop zone to your hand. So basically this fills the drop zone a little bit, and then it changes itself from the field into another card into your hand. So it's not a plus, it's just a consistency bump. And this is actually pretty handy for Granblue in general, but especially the 7 Seas archetype, as it can fetch you an important grade 2, a grade 1, or more notably here, your grade 3. As we're going to see in a moment here, you need your grade 3 as a Vanguard, as a right target. And this grade 0, Night Runner, allows you to get to that grade 3 on a more consistent basis. Also, if you accidentally mill it, you can get it to your hand and have your right target ready for next turn. So it's basically a consistency engine that is really nice and might also have some potential with its unhit ability. From Night Runner we go to grade 1, which is Witch Doctor of 7 Seas Ralstutor. And its first ability is of course the same ability, auto Vanguard and Rearguard circle. When attack hits, choose one of your Vanguard circle or Rearguard circle without any treasure markers and put a treasure marker on that. So same skill. But its unique skill is continuous Rearguard circle. If there is a marker on this unit circle this unit gets intercept. So this can help you to give a little bit more defensive options during the mid to late game, as it can be a nice 10k interceptor in the front row, which then also can pressure your opponent, but can also have some potential in the back row. And this also interacts with, if you want to play with the Protect 2 marker, because then you get more value out of the Protect 2 marker, as a grade 1 can also substitute for an interceptor, which is really nice here. Then for the second grade 1, we've got 7 Seas Helmsman Nightcrow. And Helmsman Nightcrow's ability is basically the same on hit skill, and its unique ability is similar to its old school skill as its act from drop zone. If you have a Vanguard with 7 Cs in its card name, cost Silverdust 1 and retire a rearguard not named 7 Cs Helmsman Nightcrow and call this card to the rearguard circle. So you can basically turn any unit onto the board into this particular grade 1. It doesn't sound all that too amazing, but in certain scenarios this is actually really nice, as it allows you to flood the board with 7 Cs units, so you can turn a non-7 Cs unit into its 7 C unit. But also, if you cannot flood the board with correct columns and you have an excess amount of grade 3s or grade 2s, you can just turn a grade 2 into a grade 1, so you now can create columns that might actually hit against your opponent, which is also pretty nice. And it allows you to fill the drop zone if you want to put the unit that you want to Soul Blast into drop zone as well. So there are some options here with this Nightcrow that allows you to be a bit more consistent and an easier way to flood the board, as well as if you need 7 Cs with the unhit ability on the board, this allows you to do that. Then if we dive into the grade 2s, we have this grade 2, 7 Cs Master Swordsman /Shade. And /Shade, of course, has the unhit ability, but also its unique ability, which is continuous rearguard circle. During your turn, if there is a marker on this unit's circle, this unit gets power plus 15k. So this can basically turn itself into a 24k beater if there's a treasure underneath this unit, which is a really good number, because that combined with an 8k booster is 32k that you're just swinging out of nowhere. And this can potentially be on your turn too if you went second and your Vanguard hit or one of your rearguards hit. So you could create a treasure marker and then your /Shade can go wham. So yeah, a lot of potential here and a lot of potentially strong early game action. Then for the second grade 2, and this is the main plus engine of the deck, and that is 7 Seas Pillager Night Spinel. And Night Spinel has of course the same on hit skill, but also her unique skill is auto Vanguard and rearguard circle. When placed, cost counter plus 1 and put 2 cards from the top of your deck into your drop zone. And call up to 1 card with 7 Cs in its card named, not named 7 Cs Pillager Night Spinel from your drop zone to the rearguard circle. So this is similar to the grade 0 Night Runner that allows you to fill the drop zone a bit, and then instead of adding a card to your hand, you call a unit to the field. And this is actually a plus 1, as Night Spinel will stay on the field. And this is the only plus engine the 7 Seas engine has so far with the cards revealed. So this card allows you to be a bit more aggressive in the early game, as you can flood the board a bit here if you write this thing or call to the rearguard circle, and you can maybe combine it with your 7/Shade, so you can create some beefy columns here and be a bit more aggressive in the early game. But so far we haven't really seen a lot of value here with the treasure token. Yes, we can create a 24k beater with /Shade, and we have a potential interceptor with the grade 1, but that's about it. And I don't think that's justified enough to play a wacky engine like the 7 Seas core that we have right now. But that all changed when we take a look at our new boss unit, that is Lord of 7 Seas Nightmist. And this grade 3 is insane, especially with everything that we already got here, because now we can see what this engine actually can do. As of course it has the unhit ability, but its special unique ability is continuous Vanguard circle. You get all of the effects below according to the number of your treasure markers. 1 or more. All of your rearguards with 7 Cs in their card name can attack and intercept from the back row. Before I go any further, this is an important thing, because how the way that it's stated here that they can intercept from the back row, I believe grade 1s cannot actually still intercept. Yes, they can intercept from the back row, but if they don't have the intercept ability, they might not be able to intercept. That's why one of the grade 1s actually attains or gains the intercept skill. So I could be wrong here, but I believe that because they can intercept from the back row doesn't mean they can actually physically intercept on their own. So this basically applies to the grade 2s and the grade 1 that attains or gains the intercept skill here. But I could be wrong here, just what I think is actually here the case. But then if you have 3 or more treasures, During your turn, all of your units with 7 Cs in their card names get power plus 5k. This is big because all your grade 1s turns into 13k attackers and your grade 2s into 14k attackers and your slash shade into a 29k attacker, which are pretty solid numbers here. And then if you have 6 or more, so all of your rearguard circles and Vanguard circle has a treasure token, then this unit gets auto and Vanguard circle. At the end of the battle, it attacked. Stand all of your rearguards with 7 Cs in their card names. So, if you have 1 or more marker, you can attack for 6 times potentially. Because every unit can attack from the back row. Probably most of those attacks won't do anything because your grade 1s are just 8Ks and your grade 2s are just 9Ks. Unless you have a slash shade in the back row, then you can actually have an extra attack that will then hit your opponent. Also, the grade 1 allows you to intercept from the back row because that thing can attain a intercept if you have a treasure token on it. So you could get some more value out of those 2 specific cards with 1 or more treasure tokens. But if we go to the 3 or more, then things start to change here. Because everything gains an extra 5k power. Meaning, every single attack can now hit over your opponent's base power even if they are forced. Because your grade 1s are 13k, your grade 2s are 14k, and your slash shade is then 29k, which are pretty high numbers here. And then if you have 6 or more, you can restand the entire board and basically attack for 11 times. Which is insane because this whole engine costs absolutely nothing. The only counterblast and soul that we have is for Nightcrow that recalls itself to the board, and Night Spindle that gives you a +1 if you call something to the field. And as I already explained with some other cards, your early game can be very deadly because every hit means you set up for this card. And you don't have to hit your opponent's Vanguard the entire time. If they call rearguard, you can attack into the rearguard, so you can still attain more treasures. Once you hit 6 times with your 7 Cs units, you basically are live and you can destroy your opponent. And with the potential early play with Night Spindle that can flood your board so you can attack 3 times against your opponent. And with the potential 7C/Shade that can swing in for 24 or 29 in the early game and maybe even a 32k column, probably can force extra treasures really early on if you have a good head. So there is a really high roll aspect here. And the more dangerous part is that sure, most of the attacks can be negated with 1 defensive trigger. But this whole mechanic of all your units can attack from the back row and can intercept from the back row allows you to create a very flexible board here, as you can put a couple of grade 1s in the back row. You can attack against your opponent. If they get a defensive trigger on the first attack, you can basically let a column attack on its own. Just don't attack with the booster on its own, just allow the grade 1 to boost and then attack with the entire column, because the entire column will gain an additional 10k if both those units have a treasure marker on that, and with 6 or more, everyone has a treasure marker. Then if you have a column with 2 slash shades, those are 2 29k attacks. So even if your opponent gets a defensive trigger after first attack, you attack once, there's 1 attack, then an entire column, there's a second attack, then you have 2 slash shades to the side, that's another 2 extra attacks, so there's 4 attacks. You attack with the Vanguard, that probably will not hit, but then you can reset everything, and then you have that booster behind your finger that can go into one of your opponent's rear guards, and then you still have that side column and the 2 slash shades that can still attack. And most of those attacks will not even be stopped with a second defensive trigger. So there's a lot of deadly combinations here, and that depends on how aggressive your early game was for this build, and how deadly this can be. And also a big thing here is that you can actually make this even more deadlier if you combine it with Protect 2. Because you don't have to go for Protect 1, because if you go for Protect 2, then you can give certain units even more power, and if they restand, you get more benefit from that particular Protect marker. And if you combine it with the grade 1 that can intercept from the back row, or any grade 2 in the back row, you can also get the extra shield value. So you have somewhat of the same value that the Angel Feather cards got, but those specifically work only with Protect 2, and these Granblue cards don't have to work with Protect 2. So this is pretty dangerous. What's crazy is that probably once this set drops, this is gonna be the strongest budget deck out there. And the reason why I say that is because you have the entire core, which only has 1 triple R and 1 double R, and the only thing that you miss is 1 grade 2, 1 grade 1, and your Perfect Guard. And you can slot in the Sentinel Perfect Guard, the Romario, and the Greed Shade. And all these free cards are getting reprinted around the same time this set drops. So this entire deck can be built for just a couple of bucks, depending on how expensive the Nightmist Grade 3 is going to be. So that's a really, really strong budget deck that we might have here. But I also want to clarify certain things because I don't want to make this deck stronger than it already is. There are definitely some weaknesses that we have with this engine. First off, it all relies on hit abilities. So the early game is probably really weak here. Because if you go first, you cannot attack with your grade 1. Meaning you can never use the slash shade play that you have a very strong beater because you couldn't attain an extra marker. Unless you could force out another attack, then put the marker underneath your slash shade and then you can swing. But your opponent probably will never allow for that. Also, if they just guard your early attacks, then it means it will be really hard for you to start get the ball rolling. Because as long as you cannot hit your opponent or hit one of the rear guards, your deck doesn't really do that much. And that's a big issue here, as your early game will probably be really weak. Also, another issue for this particular Granblue deck is that it doesn't actually plus at all. The only plus that you have is Night Spindle, so you need to get into that card to get 1 plus off. So if you're up against a control clan that can just wipe your board, destroy all your advantage, you're probably in for a lot of trouble here. Also, you're pretty weak against decks that can force out defensive triggers on a consistent basis like Oracle Think Tank, but another major problem for your deck is Majesty Lord Blaster if they sit on the 18k base, because it would be really hard to then apply a lot of pressure, especially if they manage to get a defensive trigger, because then most of your attacks would just be shut off or easily be guarded with 1 or 2 cards. And another major problem here is that this 7 Seas deck has only one right target, and that's Nightmist. If you do not get to Nightmist, you're probably gonna do absolutely nothing. So if you do not get to that grade 3, it's basically game over. And that is where Greed Shade and of course Night Runner comes into play to basically increase the consistency to as high as much possible. But because you do not mill as aggressively as most other Granblue cards or other Granblue decks, then it's very possible that you do not mill your Nightmist and you do not draw into your Nightmist and you basically do nothing. So there are definitely some issues here with the 7 Seas engine that we have right now, but at the same time we got some insane potential here. That restand of the whole board and the way that you can circumvent or interact with potential defensive triggers, because sure, you might not be able to hit 11 times, but you can most definitely attack for like 6, 7, 8 times for very good numbers, even if your opponent gets a defensive trigger somewhere down the line. And also the extra pressure that you have, the free power, looks to be really solid, and any non-controlled deck might have a really hard time to face up against this particular budget deck that will come out of Rummy, Labyrinth, or Butterfly Under the Moonlight. And that was basically the new archetype that we got for Granblue. A very interesting archetype for 7 Seas, and it looks to be very powerful, but at the same time has some obvious flaws and counterplay ability to it, because its early game can be very strong, but it depends if your opponent allows them to be that strong. And if you start to play around that engine, it could be really slow for the Granblue player to get the ball rolling, and it might be a little bit too late for them to win the game, especially if your opponent can just pressure you with a lot of crits or a lot of multi-attacks, or maybe has control options available to them to just destroy your advantage and leave you with a field without any 7 Seas units. Because another thing is, you're probably gonna play 1 or 2 units that aren't 7 Seas, and those units you can just let the attack hit you because they don't get any advantage out of the attack except for the potential retire of a rearguard or the extra damage to your Vanguard. But you much rather take that at the negative point than them also attaining or getting a marker or treasure token. With that out of the way, let's talk about some extra information that we've got for Silverdust Blaze, because they didn't reveal any cards today, but they did reveal and showcase the new SP packs that we're going to get for this set. And with those SP packs revealed, we saw the artworks of some of the cards within those SP packs, and some things are quite interesting and worthwhile to talk about. Because let's take a look at the first SP pack, as we've got the one for Link Joker for Messiahs. And we can see here that we're going to get of course, the similar SP pack that we've got for the Tri-Free set. The only difference here is that instead of the critical trigger, they're gonna reprint the draw trigger for the Sentinel. So that's a difference here. Depending on what type of preference you have, you might be happy with this change or you might not. I don't really care about this particular change, but what I do care about are those 2 cards with the secret tag on them. Because the Grade 1 is probably gonna be the new Stridefather, and this is Lady Battler of the White Dwarf. So really interesting that they chose her to be the new Stridefather for Link Joker, or in this case the Grade 3 Searcher, for anybody that's confused that I'm calling the Stridefather. And then the Grade 2 to the left of it, this is an interesting one, because this is a very new card in the Messiah archetype, as this was introduced in the last support wave for the GRL for Messiah, which is Lady Fencer of Matter Transmission. And she was a really vital card for that engine at the time, because she allowed for multi-tacking, for some resource gaining, and was a really strong Grade 2 for the deck for Messiah once she came out in that set at the end of the GRL. And I'm very curious of what type of approach you're going to take with her, and she's probably going to be a very staple card for that new Messiah build, as she was back in the time, and especially since she's now also included in the SP pack. So I'm very curious of what her skill is going to be. Probably something with unlocking and maybe power gaining and maybe even resourcing management, because that's what she did back when she was revealed during the GRL. Now with the Link Joker SP pack out of the way, let's take a look at the 2 SP packs for Kagero, because yes, Kagero is not getting 1, but they're getting 2 SP packs. One for Overlord and one for Blade Master. And for Blade Master, there's nothing really spectacular here, because everything we already knew. They're going to introduce the Grade 2 and the Grade 1 Garen and Doha, which is pretty obvious because they're the most important cards for the Blade Master deck. But then when we take a look at the Overlord SP pack, this is where things are getting interesting or confusing, because the 2 units without the skills, which we don't know yet, are units which I don't recognize at all. And it might just be the case because I'm not that familiar with Kagero cards, but I think these are actually brand new cards. I'm very confused of what these cards actually gonna be, if they're just retrains of newer cards. But I assume these are brand new cards, so I have no clue what their skill is gonna be, but we at least know the artwork. And yeah, a new Grade 1 and a new Grade 2 for Overlords, which probably will interact with the new Cross and maybe any other Overlord card out there that we already got in Standard. But then we get to something very interesting and maybe a little bit controversial. Because if we go to the SP pack for OTT and DP, and mainly OTT, we see something very interesting. Because they are reintroducing Ichikishima in Standard. But this time as a Grade 2. Not as a Stride unit Grade 4. So I'm very curious of what type of approach you're going to take Ichikishima with. Does she have some kind of guard restrict? Is she going to do something with drawing, something with defensive options, or negating stuff? I honestly have no clue. I'm very curious. The artwork looks amazing though, so I'm very excited and interested in what she's going to do. Also for the DP's SP pack, we now know that's a mix between Cosmic Hero and Metaworks. Very curious why they went with a 50-50 split instead of just one SP pack for Cosmic Heroes, which in my opinion should have been the main archetype within the set, but I'm not designing this set, so I'm gonna keep out of that one. And of course, these SP packs confirmed that all the newer SP packs will also get the shield ticket with the clan icon in the shield ticket's perspective. So that's an interesting take, which is now confirmed. Also, we now know that the SPs for Kagero, the Stridefather, the Drop Sentinel, and as well as the shield ticket will probably be relatively cheaper than all the other ones, because they are in 2 types of different SP packs instead of just only 1 like all the other clans. So will maybe have an impact for Kagero players, but then again, they also need to collect way more SPs. But that's basically all the information that we got today. There was a lot to talk about, because not only did we get the insight in the new SP packs, as well as some new units and some interesting takes that they're going to introduce in Standard, but we also saw the brand new mechanic, as well as an entire sub-archetype introduced for Granblues with the 7 Seas archetype, which looks to be a very, very powerful budget deck. Probably the strongest budget deck out there once the set hits, and could potentially be a meta contender, but at the same time it does have some flaws, and once players are starting to playtest against it, they might see the missing links here, the issues that the deck might have against some top tier contenders, because Vanquisher probably will destroy that deck for Granblue, because not only do you remove cards from the game that they cannot access to, but you also control everything on the board and you pressure the hand to a very decent amount. So we probably still have some Vanquisher running around once the Rummy Labyrinth set drops, but we have to wait and see of what the Silverdust Blaze set will do, but that's a story for another time. As always, this video has been brought to you by our lovely patrons over at patreon.com/VanguardInsider. You guys are amazing. If you do want to support the channel or everything that's happening on the channel, you can simply do that by liking the video, subscribing to the channel, and hitting the bell button to be updated for future Vanguard content. But if you want to support us a little bit more directly, you can head over to patreon.com/VanguardInsider and become a Patreon today. But with that said, I'm Mr. Time Leap, and I see you guys in the next one!